Weber. Young.
Here.
Yoder. Fannin.
Okay, with that, the approval of the agenda. And the only thing we will add after, right before the adjournment, is public comment, which we have to do. So with that, I'd entertain a motion for Mays.
Second.
Arbogast. We have to roll call that, or can I voice vote it? No, voice? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Okay, before we get started, I don't think there's any other business that needs to come before this committee. But before we get started tonight, I thank the board members for attending. I know special meetings aren't always the easiest thing to schedule for and to get to, and I appreciate all of you coming tonight. I know a couple of you went on a tour of the Health and Education building this afternoon, and I thank Alina for taking that, and glad some of you took advantage of it.
Thank you.
Would hope tonight's meeting is not going to be a real long one. We had a longer presentation at our meeting. I'm hoping here that we can get into questions and answers that the board has fairly quickly. We've got both Dave and Neil here, and we thank you gentlemen for being here again tonight to answer any questions. It's really important that all the board members are completely aware of everything that we've got going on and have input into it, and we value that, and that's why we're having this meeting tonight. With that, I'm going to turn it over, before I turn it over to the architects and the board, Mr. Ingalls, who is our chairman of our property committee, would like to add a couple of things.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think everybody, or I hope everybody understands, and I know the committee, when they met at the last committee meeting, we emphasized this. We're not at the point of designing a building or any of that. For a long time, we've talked about what I think have come down to three options to address the concerns about the existing building. One option would be to do remodeling, to bring it up to compliance with current codes, both building codes, accessibility, energy efficiency, and so forth. Second option would be to build a new building. And the third option would be to go elsewhere and remodel an existing building. Several different people suggested alternative sites, and we looked at them. Some of them we looked at in more detail than others. Some we didn't really even look at because they weren't available or there was other plans. So we kind of got that off of the table. We have had, since the last meeting, conversations with OSF about the possible use of the new nursing home. I was going to say rumor has it. I don't know that it's a rumor. It's for sale. But any use of that building is by anybody else other than a nursing home would be years away. You get into the problems with the state license that exists and who would own it, and it's not the right number of square feet. It's not layout, really isn't a lot different than what we have. It's a bunch of hallways. So that one really, I guess that's the last discussion we've had about alternative sites. So I think we're down to, do we remodel or do we build? And I think there's a couple of key factors. Maybe, I think we talked about them, and I think Dave had them in the presentations, but they may have gotten, I don't know, overlooked because of the length of the presentation, a lot of other facts up there. And that's if we're going to remodel. it would require the building to be vacated during that period because of the nature of the remodeling that has to be done. It's pretty extensive, which would mean finding an alternative site, enough square footage, whatever. And not that that couldn't be done, but I think that issue needs to be on the table when we consider the two options that I think are really before the board. I guess you could say a third option is do nothing. Live with what we got and face the whatever down the road. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, with that, Dave or Neil, do you have, before we turn it over to the questions, do you have something you'd like to present or say?
Well, we have prepared some additional information from last time, what I think would be helpful. Some cost overview for
Okay.
the reuse existing building, remodel the existing building option, and then the build new option. So what I thought I'd do is just skip through the presentation to those new slides.
Sounds good.
There, just before I get there, I did put in this sort of planning and design process slide. It's one that just kind of shows the context of where we're at in the process of doing the building. Like Mike mentioned, we're not really designing a new building yet. So this presentation just shows 6 steps, and it kind of, the point of it is just that we're at the beginning of the process. Confirming the program, functional planning, but the actual design of everything is awaiting once the results of these first 2 steps are determined. The one thing I wanted to just mention on costs at this point in the project planning process, we're kind of tossing ideas of costs based on not really worked out designs, on ideas and thoughts. How much does it cost to move? How much does it cost to lease space? Things like that. So we try to do that in a thoughtful way, but at the same time, it isn't the same as having completed detailed design that you're going through and counting every nut and bolt. So concept 1, what I tried to do was make it so you could keep track of previous discussions. Earlier in 2010, I believe, there was the energy efficiency upgrades study that Johnson Controls was doing, Johnson Controls. And I used that as kind of the structure to try to put cost projections together. Things like replacing windows, attic insulation, providing access panels in that, utilities, new air handler units, digital controls and all that. And all that added up to about a 1.151 million. The next category was just renovation costs. And so in that case, if you're imagining that you're going through doing renovation, some of the things we're trying to accommodate are like wider doors for ADA and revised bathrooms, things like that for basic requirements. So I plugged in an allowance of $60 a square foot and then went through a series of other allowances, ideas that there's some exterior work that would need to be done on the outside of the building. I've shown an allowance for putting a new exit stair and an elevator to provide better egress and then ADA accessibility to the second floor, sprinklering the building, design fees, those are all the same. Well, no, excuse me, that's next slide. Design fees, there's a little bit of site work, not a lot, but a little bit. There's the allowances for other project cost adjustments, such as the FF&E and things like that. And then that projected up to about a 2.1 million. If you summarize that then, the two, energy efficiency and renovation, came to about 3.2 or 3. And then some other allowances, there's a $100,000 allowance, kind of imagining what does it cost to move out of the space into temporary facilities while this work is being done. Also, some allowances for making a move. There's 2 moves involved. One into the temporary space and one into the final space. There's an asbestos abatement allowance that's common to both options. And then there's just a contingency because of what we talked last time. There's a lot of unknowns when you're opening up older buildings and things. So at the end of the day, this cost projection came to about 3.8 million is what we're looking at. On the pros and cons, I'll skip past that if you want to. Cost review for the concept 2, then. So the first item that we didn't really talk about last time, but I've included now, is that there's a cost to take down the existing building. The concept, site development, the idea was that to come off Torrance Street means that we need to have the building out of the way, pull through. So I projected about 714,000 for that. That's based on recent results we've had for other projects. Maybe it's a little heavy, don't really know yet, but I wanted it to be careful. There are costs that we need to project for IHR, but if you notice, we've pushed them off to the side because there's some question about whether that's part of your responsibilities or not. But the way the concept is drawn, there's about a 3,000 square foot need of space, and projected that to be about 399,000. When you look at the new building and site development, this part of the presentation is the same as the other presentation. So when you add these, there's allowance for the existing building removal and the other new costs, not really folding in the IHR costs, allowance for moving costs, and then a contingency, because there is a contingency and there are unknowns with this option too. It's just not as heavy as the other one. Projecting about $6 million, a little bit over that. Pros and cons and things, but that's kind of a quick recap. If you want to go over any more of that detail,
Let's
be happy
see,
to, but-
let's see what the questions are.
Okay.
Maybe some of that'll come up. So stay up here, Dave, you're gonna answer them.
Okay. Go slinking away.
Okay. Board, Mr. Ritter.
So as I look at this, the option is 3 million versus 6 point whatever million. So 3.8 million versus 6 point whatever million. Those are the two numbers that are on the table. And when we were at our meeting last month, was there a 4 point whatever million number that we were given that 4.6 million? So was that just because that the removal of the other building was not on that?
That's a big part, yes. Also covering moving costs and the extra contingency.
Okay, so essentially what we're looking at is if we start and go one way, it's 3.8 million. If we go the other way, it's 6.1 million. And we're looking at either building brand new or renovating what we have. That's what's on the table, correct? Everybody, is that right?
Yep.
Or do nothing.
Yes.
But on the table right now are those, you're right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that all the numbers are correct,
Absolutely.
because I just want to understand.
Yep. Mr. Killian.
Yes, thank you again for coming back for all this. Hopefully it won't be too painful. In past projects, have you ever taken on a building like this that we have and make it work? I mean, the feasibility of it, the way it's
you mean
designed and
existing?
stuff now, I mean, energy efficient and it's fairly archaic, I guess I would say. I mean,
The part that's a little scary is what do you see once you start opening up the building and the conditions there?
Yeah.
Because right now we're just looking at it somewhat superficially.
Go ahead, Bill.
Was there somewhere on here with just the boiler and the windows? Because you had talked about like a level 1 and level 2. Once ADA gets involved. Is there on here just that cost?
No, the vision of this one involves making some ADA improvements going through, assuming between the hazardous material, the asbestos type removal and that, you would be getting
Yeah.
into most of the finishes and turning walls.
Well, I think we already had that in the budget to take care of all this.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I'm just kind of curious as just what the boiler, that level 1 you were talking about before, what kind of cost that would be?
I think part of it, you would not put in the new stair and elevator. You would, it's a little bit of a trick though. The way the existing building code is written is that if you just repair and do energy efficiency improvements and you just abate the hazardous materials and don't make changes, you can do a level 1 improvement, which does allow what you're talking about.
Okay.
But
Is
as
that
soon
or is that the state's?
No, that's the national code. That's the
Okay,
IBC.
You can see what problems we've had over there. Okay.
So then it becomes a question of, is that of interest? I think technically speaking, that's an option, where you're just fixing just those things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that just need all the options in front of us, and that's how we make our decision, so.
I guess what I would say is, I don't know how easy it is to start and stop that before you trip into enough changes where you trigger, the level 2 renovation.
And I don't think the state's gonna give you that answer.
Mr. Holt,
Right.
I think the question I understood from Paul was that what got us from the, whatever it was, 4.5 million to 6 million, and part of that is the demolition, part of that is the design. What other things are there that were not included in that first presentation?
The demolition costs, the $100,000 contingency, the allowance for moving costs. And then also the $200,000 allowance for other project cost adjustments. That's with the FF&E and stuff, that was not included last time before.
You also have a couple design numbers in there that weren't in there before.
They are changed a little bit. The existing building removal does involve some design. Doesn't sound like it would, but it's still a package that needs to be put out to bid and managed with the permitting process.
Yeah,
So
there's 368 for A&E basic design, and 39 for civil engineering design, and 15 for existing building removal design. So there's $500,000 in design costs that weren't in there before,
the,
which they have to show up somewhere, so.
yeah, I mean, just trying to put all the parts in the elements so you can see the
Right.
parts completely.
Mr. Ritter.
Mr. Chairman, as being one of the people who went on the tour this last hour ago, what we found is that there was a large amount of storage that was needed for materials that had to be kept for a period of time. And as I understand it, currently we don't have enough room in this design for that type of a standard. And I don't know that it's true or not.
Melinda and I have talked about that. The thing is, this is not a design to get bids. This was a concept, the concept of putting the functional areas together.
Isn't it, though, if it's a square footage issue, and we're dealing with a square footage issue, which has nothing to do with the physical design, if you have a square footage issue that doesn't allow for the amount of storage that's needed, whether it's designed or not, then wouldn't it be something that we should discuss at this point?
This conceptual design has a certain amount of storage built into it. If it's not enough, I mean, there's no doubt.
But if it's not enough, the number goes up. Because
Potentially.
according to 234 or $245 a square foot, then that physically changes.
Yes.
So I guess maybe if it's sounding like we don't have enough square footage, according to what I'm being told,
Well,
then, you know what? I retract my
Maybe.
question.
Paul?
No, I don't know. Dave, do you have an answer to Mr. Ritter's?
Well, I think that the idea of continuing to vet the program is something that makes sense. You keep doing that. Some question about storage is it's a need that's going to decrease over time, but there is a need for it now. So the question, how much of that space do you want to build for? So it's kind of a target you just have to pick. We picked for a little less than what's there right now, assuming that it'll reduce some, or you might want to store it in less expensive space than the new building.
Could some of that be the way the building is designed now is not necessarily, there's a lot of, I would say, wasted space, offices that are maybe too big, other spaces that are too big, that when the square footage changes and the building changes, then some of those are dealt with. So some of these areas that are larger than need be would be reduced, and those would be used for storage. Is that not correct?
Yes, and I know, like, when we've gone downstairs to look at those rooms, they're huge rooms. Some part of them are used. It's hard to know over time if that's come and gone. I would say, though, it is important, part of the reason you carry a contingency is if you're starting to go through design and find out that, you know what, we really do have not enough allowance for storage space. One of the approaches is you make the building bigger. The other is you make something else smaller and keep the overall target. If we've gone through and found that, like the space I've projected for that big conference room and storm shelter, maybe that's too big. Don't really know, because we haven't had the detailed design discussions that you have with the actual building design process.
Okay, who else? Mr. Mays?
I'm kind of thinking, the square footage out there now, Melinda might help, is 28,000 square feet, which is a lot compared to the 19 we're looking at. You're going to be losing a lot of space that is not needed, or, I mean, you're looking at what, 9,000 square feet? Basically.
Melinda, you and Chris can sure come up here, because you may be
I
getting
don't
a
want
lot
to
of
put you on the
questions.
spot, but
Chris, want to come up and
I'm
join?
kind of looking at the
You're going to let her
fact that-
stand on her own, right? Okay, that a girl.
Personally, I'd be very interested in the design part of the building to really decide what offices need to be where and how we're putting some a little more efficiency, efficiently, so that they can share bathrooms for our clients, look at the storage area. I will say, we really don't want to move twice because it would be a nightmare for our clients, or to move out of the Pontiac area because that's central for the county, for people to access the service on that. But yes, I would be very interested in working closely on the building design and what would be most efficient. As Mike had said, this was an overall concept.
Okay, I'm just, well, like I said, that's a lot of space to lose. And as far as efficiency, right now, if we were to go with a new boiler and the windows in that, how would that be efficient compared to a 19,000 square foot? I mean, you're going to be reducing your overall, whatever you want to call that, footprint down to 19,000 square feet. Is that going to save the county that much money that we need to spend $6 million?
It's tricky with that because if you think of like an analogy of a new school, where a lot of times you build a new school, it's all energy efficient, but utilities cost more. It's because it's a better
Right.
performing. It's doing healthier air, it's bringing outdoor air, it's dealing with air conditioning, all these things that modern codes do that the older buildings don't do. Or if you
That's-
have an old uninsulated mass building, so you're changing windows and putting some insulation in the attic, but not really addressing the rest of the building. It's-
Carolyn, did you have your hand up? Right.
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
I think-
Question for Melinda. How long have they been talking about this boiler, in your experience?
I've worked for the county for 38 years, and I've heard about the boiler for 38 years, so I'm more concerned about my vaccines because they're so expensive, and we have a generator there on our pharmaceutical refrigerators, and that is a definite must because of the cost to replace those vaccines, and it would go on the county insurance. Would be horrifying.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
So is it my so we had this discussion about generators and whatnot. Is there a current allocation for a generator to run that facility the same way that she's referring to?
With the option one?
Yeah,
There's a line item for doing the electrical upgrades to it.
And that would be in both option one and option two, is that correct?
Yes.
Can I ask what the current square footage is of the existing building? Because I don't see that on this.
It's 28,000.
That includes the basement space, a lot of that unusable space, just to be clear.
Mr. Holt?
Is the object of our meeting to decide, do we want to take the next step on a new building or stay with the building and go through reconstruction? Or, I mean, we're discussing sizes, we're discussing design, we're discussing things that are really, I don't know that we're there yet on having you or someone else design a building.
If you don't mind a suggestion, what I would like to see is the problems start to get more defined. Make some decisions that could make it a simpler issue to grasp, like, is the site just in Pontiac, or is it in other communities like mentioned last time? If you can make that decision, that helps the group focus on the more specific. And then given, if the answer was yes in Pontiac, then I've heard many times that the current site actually works really well for the people using the facility because it's very residential and doesn't involve going the other side of town and through busy traffic. If that decision could be made, so then you were just talking about your three options of remodeling the building. Maybe there's four if we want to consider what you were mentioning, Bill. The new building or doing nothing, all those are viable. But I think it would help everybody not be quite so.
As much as I'd like to see a county building in Dwight, I don't think this is the proper facility, operation, department to move to Dwight when all the employees are pretty well local here. So I guess to that point, I think that to have it in another community is not a question that I don't know if we want a motion to have it built. If we're going to do the building, do it in Pontiac, then I would make that motion. If that would narrow down our focus, because I don't think that,
Building anywhere else
building
makes
it
sense.
anywhere else is an option.
I'll second that motion.
So your motion, if I'm correct, Darrell, is to build a new building here in Pontiac?
Just to
If we're
build it,
going to build a new building,
to keep it in Pontiac.
then keep it in Pontiac.
Pontiac. Okay,
I'm just going to narrow
Okay.
down to one decision
Okay.
at a time.
okay, got a motion and a second on that. Any discussion?
Hold on, the motion is,
If we build, we
Pontiac
would
is the
build
only
it in
consideration.
Pontiac. Not that we're going to build, if I understand.
Yes, that's
You-
correct.
That
That
correct?
is correct, yes.
This is just, we're narrowing the town
scope.
down. That's the motion on the floor. Well, yeah. It would be the same with renovation, Paul.
Very good, Paul.
Yeah. Okay, let's roll call that. Christie?
Were you having comment on that? Oops.
Well, I thought we did, but go ahead.
Well,
Are we ready for the roll call?
No, Carolyn's got a comment.
I just want to comment that I think the first question is whether or not we're going to do anything. I mean, it's really kind of a theoretical question at this point. But you can go ahead and have a vote, I guess.
Mrs. Ambrose?
I guess I don't feel I'm ready to vote yet. I would still like to know, who says there's a problem out there? Is it the staff? Is it the patrons who use it? Is it the maintenance department? Why has this come to the forefront again now? Who says there's a problem?
Well, the first thing I'll address on that, Mrs. Ambrose, and there may be other comments. Every year, when the board is reorganized, we have a long-term planning. And for probably since Marty's first tenure as chairman on the board, 6 years ago at least, and possibly before that.
Probably before that.
One of the long-range plans was to build or remodel the H&E building. And that's been up every year, and it has been, for whatever reason, it hasn't gotten done. And so we just think for design and for ease of the patient using that building, and it is a program that's mandated, that it's better to do it now than to continue to delay it and have problems. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer for you, Mrs. Ambrose. If not, I will certainly let someone else answer the question. So, Alina or Mike or...
The board, every year, has made a determination that something needed to be done with the H&E building, whether it was build or renovate, and I don't think there has been a whole lot of movement behind renovation, so.
And it was on again this year.
Yes, it was.
I mean, that was another...
Well, if I could, for me, one of the big concerns, before we really got to this level of detailed discussion, is maintenance of an old building. It's always problematic just because it's old. It's going to require more maintenance than a remodel or new building. And then the energy efficiency. I know there's a lot of discussion about the boiler, and some people don't know if it'll last another year. It probably will. Those things are tanks. But it's horrible if you look at the utilities.
Even a tank gives up.
Yeah, you're heating and cooling a lot of unusable square footage, windows, insulation, that sort of thing. So long-term costs, ongoing costs of the building if we do nothing, as opposed to if we remodel or build new, I think those long-term costs are a big concern for me as we go from budget year to budget year.
In budget year to budget year, we have, I won't say put off, but we have not probably put as much money as needed to be put in the building because we were looking at doing something
Exactly.
on a larger scale.
Okay, any other questions before we vote?
Mr. Chairman, have we determined by doing these, either renovating or updating, what kind of a payoff time we're looking at as far as the return on our investment? So in other words, are we gaining quite a bit of savings or a substantial amount of savings in the process of going and updating everything versus where we're at right now? I guess that's my question. Cricket.
Dave, you have any costs?
I think with ADA concerns,
Yeah.
That was just, yeah, no, I appreciate you.
Okay, Carolyn.
I think that's an excellent question, and my next question is, when Paul and I toured the building, it looked like good use is being made of the space. People seem to be working well with the space. There's discussions of ADA and so on. Are there existing violations right now that we haven't been told about?
Yeah.
Is it,
If you went through and,
I mean, I know different standards apply depending on the age of the building. So for this building right now, is it sitting there? Is it okay?
there
For
are
that?
well, you'd have to go through, and there's a lot of smaller doors that don't have the door approach clearances. There's, none of the restrooms are accessible right now. That's where I was saying you could change some of that by absorbing an adjacent room, moving some walls.
I don't think you're answering the question, though.
You're saying,
So
can
it's
we
not
do
conform-
nothing?
What it,
Is
what
it
the-
legal to do nothing?
Yeah, the existing building code allows you to use it the way it is, as long as you don't make other improvements to it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, we still have a motion and a second, and if we've had enough discussion, we're going to see where this falls. So go ahead and roll call that, will you, please, Christie? We're voting if we build, or as Paul said, if we renovate. We will do that here in Pontiac, or right here in the vicinity of Pontiac, where it is now. All we're doing, I think, Darrell, is wanting to establish that as one choice. So we're going to roll call that. Christie?
Vietti,
Yes.
Bunning,
No.
Slagle,
No.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Steichen, Killian,
Yes.
Kestner,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Gerwin,
Abstain.
Lovell,
Yes.
Allen,
Mike's on.
Arbogast,
Yes.
Weller, Ambrose,
Yes,
Carly, Holt,
Yes.
Runyon,
Yes.
Mays,
Yes.
Heath,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Yoder, Fannin.
Yes.
Okay, so the site's going to stay here. Now, the next thing on the table is to remodel, build new, or do nothing. That is not a motion, no. But I think those are the choices. Mr. Killian?
I guess when I look at this renovation, the cost of windows, insulation, that kind of thing, if that would say, I mean, we're going to spend 1.2 million, let's just say that. Is it really, I mean, if we need windows, we need windows. The insulation's naturally going to save you money, electrical upgrades, that kind of thing. Is it still going to be an efficiently run building, or are we going to have bad spots, hot spots, cold spots when we shouldn't have, and heating this? With the 28,000 square feet, can we not heat and cool all of them spots? I mean, we say there's these big empty rooms that nobody's using, but they still have to be heated and cooled and stuff. I mean, with these upgrades?
I think the,
I mean, can we zone heat and
Right,
cool?
the focus is really on the second floor and first floor spaces, and not so much on the crawl spaces and basement spaces down below. So I don't know that you would be presenting over the 28,000 square feet. This can be sort of like where the people are actually occupying the space as a higher priority in that.
Okay, Mr. Bunning?
I guess I don't mean to put Melinda or Chris on the spot here, but I'm going to, and I apologize. Is there a current building or space that is currently built in Livingston County that you've looked at to see the potential for retooling and being able to make a building that we already have in the county usable space for the H&E building for the county?
I have not looked at the building or am aware of for that. One of my concerns when we discussed moving it outside Pontiac would be staff time, because we're at bookkeeping once a week. If it would be a burden to send staff down to the treasurer's office and bookkeeping all the time. I am not aware of a building in Pontiac that would work. Personally, I want staff all in one location because it helps for supervision, and we integrate programs and they fill in for each other. So if I had to satellite clinics out in various offices, it would be a management nightmare.
Okay.
I think just being centrally located in the county is important, and the transportation, our only transportation is show bus, whether they would be willing to reconfigure the routes for that. That would be the only concern if it was at the north or the east or west or south side of the county. Transportation would have to be looked at as a definite need.
Okay, we're gonna go with the lady first, and then we'll got Mark and Bill.
Okay, since Melinda and Chris have been picked on, Joe, I'm sorry, but what's the possibility of IHR moving somewhere else and then renting some other space, taking that building and then having a smaller footprint for a new building and hooking it onto IHR, with the present IHR building, and having that unit move somewhere else since it rents?
Who's the question for? Okay.
It's just food for thought. Has that been
Alina?
thought about?
Well, the one thing, Linda, is that the building, they do lease a certain space for us, but the space that we're thinking about keeping, it was actually built by IHR. It was deeded to the county and it's built on county property, but it was actually built through a grant through Humiston Trust, I believe. And so they built that specifically for IHR. It wouldn't be right for the county to do that.
Okay, Mark?
Do you want to add something, Joe?
Oh,
That's correct. We've had 3 different additions, all purchased by IHR, and then when they were completed, my previous director gave it back to the county and we kept our lease as always. So we've been in business for about 44 years. We have always rented from the county in the same exact spot.
Mark?
Okay, I know the new building here is just a concept, I understand that, but we're going from 28,000 square feet down to 19,000 square feet in the concept design. I guess what I want to make sure, I assume it probably happened, but I was also told never to assume anything, that Melinda and Chris worked with the 2 gentlemen on the square footage, and this would suit their needs, the 19,000 square feet. So I'd kind of like to hear from Melinda and Chris whether that's kind of the area they're looking at, because I understand there's dead space out there with the 28,000 square feet.
Yes, we did work, and we had several work sessions, and so, yes, I had input. This is my current staff. These are the current offices. Let's reconfigure our clinic space for all our different clinics. We don't always hold them all at the same time. Storage is in the basement, but we basically don't use the storage except for our equipment loan out piece and for files that we have to keep for the 5 to 8 years that the state mandates. So the second floor on the H&E building is staff only, and we are down on staff from our years. I would say I am down probably about 10 staff members because we were down on grants and funding. So right now, we do have some empty offices up there.
To kind of piggyback off of Mark's question real quick, Melinda, the records that you have to keep for 5 years, do they need to be on property, or do they have to be easily accessible for you, or can we find another storage space of a building that we currently own to put them in?
We just have to have access to it. It's like immunization records. Sometimes we have to go dig in the files for that. It's not where we do it very often. So just have to have a key and send somebody over there to dig.
And then,
Jason?
if we were to decide to renovate and you need to move for the 2 years that it would take, what kind of square footage? Would you need that 19,000 square feet, or can you, I'm just trying to figure out what we would have to try and find you for space for the repositioning for the renovation.
I would have to really look at the clinics, and we would do, only certain days, certain clinics. Some of the people, for the maternal child health, they could chart from home, and we would just have them come in because everything is electronic. So I could make some supervisory judgments on that, who has to come in when and when we would do it. So really, I would have to sit down and really look at the clinics in the space, which I'm always willing to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mays, I think you were up.
Yeah, I think this is for Melinda. Is there other places in Livingston County that do some of what you do out there?
No.
I got this paperwork that was sent to me, and one of the examples was right across the street here, the Caring Pregnancy Center, right on the corner here. Is that,
We work in conjunction with that. We offer, ours are state grants, so we have a family planning clinic. It's a sliding fee. Yes, they can go to a medical practitioner, or they can go to ours, just because of the sliding fee. WIC's a government grant that only governments operate, or, it's a one-shot deal per county, or one agency per county. Some of the other grants are tied into that. Immunizations, physicians give them, but sometimes the cost of immunizations, it's easier to send them to the health department. So we've worked well with our other partners and kind of split and filled the niche, is what we're trying to go, doing something that nobody else is doing. The Healthy Families Program is a intensive home visiting positive parenting program. They work closely with Caring Pregnancy to perform some of the others, but they go in and do weekly visits for assessment and education.
okay, I'm just kind of looking at, when you sit there and talk about renovation compared to new, it's obvious right now, with just money-wise, you would go with the renovation, just because of the money. But to get building new, you would have to compact what you're doing. Now, you say you partner with them. Is there any way to get with them? Because you're basically, are they both using grant money that, no?
And I'm not on the board of Crisis Pregnancy. I think that's all private donations.
Okay. I'm asking that question.
Yeah, more of a religious, so, we cooperate. I do have a staff member who serves on the board, but it's a different focus.
It's a different focus.
Well, it's got a religious, which as a government agency, we don't put any religion with it.
Mr. Heath?
How long would you be relocated from the building if we did the remodel? In months, or what's the estimated time of?
Dave, you had that, I think.
I would probably plan on 6 months. There's probably ways of steering that one way or another.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Would you bring in like FEMA things, the trailers, or is that, or are you looking for, to moving these people out until the remodel is done? Are you looking at like finding other buildings, or are you looking at
My thought was
office trailers?
if you were trying to find other space, you wouldn't have to spend a lot of money developing. Like, you wouldn't want to bring in temporary facilities and have to spend all the cost developing the site to serve them. But if there was, yeah, we have 100,000 plugged in as the allowance for that. It might be that it's not all done, not all square footage at one time. You might be working at one end of the building and marching your way down, so, but maybe that. Right.
I saw a hand up here. Carolyn, did you have your hand up?
My question was, if just the boiler was repaired, would they have to move out for that? Or would they just be shut down for a few days? What would be involved?
Right, if you were just repairing the boiler, I think you just wouldn't have heat for that period of time, but it wouldn't be move out of the building.
So just do it in summer?
That would be the smart thing to do, yes.
John?
Sorry, it looks like flat. I was looking at the old, from 2010, the meeting minutes that Alina sent the other day. So there was a couple times when it looked like it was pretty much decided to put a new boiler in and upgrade the electricity. And then after the boiler thing fell through for some reason, which I'm wondering about that, and then Cooper Schmitz gave a quote for like $450,000. Can you give me a rough history there of what happened with that? And
Sure. I was kind of wondering about that because I think that there are quite a few board members that weren't on board then. So the discussions kind of revamped up around 2008 when we had kind of the same type of thing that we're going through now with SmartWatt, where they're coming in to do some efficiency type upgrades, and so that's where we began talking about it. And the health and education building has always been where you can see the most amount of savings. So when they began speaking about that, some of the things that were brought to their attention is, one, the health and education building is probably one of the least energy efficient buildings that we have. And most of that is because of windows, but also has to do with the boiler system and the fact that we have individual air units in the facility. We don't have any fresh air return, so there's no fresh air circulation within the building. And so that became an issue when they were talking about replacing that boiler and bringing in a new centralized air unit because of how they would have to run that and how much it would take for them to do that. And they were still coming up with the part that it was going to be very challenging in order to do that and still bring in fresh air. And when we got the estimate back, it did come in significantly higher. I think we were looking at 1.9 just for those renovations for the facilities itself, for the boiler, new windows, and new AC units. And so when they looked at that amount, the board said, no, the building still needs other modifications, other things need to be done, and so there's no reason to spend that kind of money on that building. Plus all the logistics and the fact that it would still not be accessible. And although the building technically, you're not going to get cited for anything within that building, there are still areas that people cannot access if they're in a wheelchair. There's just not a way for them to do it. So they have to make modifications and bring those facilities downstairs, I assume is what you do, because you can't meet with them on the second floor. So that's kind of what went into that decision, and I think the decision was made kind of at that time that they weren't willing to renovate the existing building. I think our people have been very happy in the facility. I think overall you guys are happy with the facility. It's just that in order to make the upgrades that the board has seen as important, those were some of the things that we were facing. We can't physically make it accessible. There's a lot of challenges to doing that, and we still will have challenges with several things, like the fresh air and things like that. It will be difficult for us to do this without these people there.
John, can you turn your mic on when you talk?
It was the amount. It was the amount that they were estimating that the investment into that building and the logistics of getting it done and the deficiencies that would still remain after those repairs were done.
okay, and then the power bills out there, who pays them? Are we or the tenants?
We do, yes, we do pay them. The county, it's paid through the general fund.
And how much are those a year?
I can look that up for you, but I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that we do, between IHR, public health, mental health, we collect a little bit over 80,000, but that does not cover all the expenses for the building as of today.
Okay.
Those three
80, I
groups pay, we always call it rent.
If I
But it's,
remember
the
correctly,
idea is
it's-
to recover our costs. and we
Melinda
don't.
pays like 55,000, Joe pays like 30,000, and Chris has a very small portion, less than 10. Yes.
Can I ask, how would that compare to a new building? I mean, this is what kind of a question I asked earlier is, you know, obviously you're gonna look at 80,000 a year, that what we're spending now compared to a new building, you're gonna be spending 60,000 still?
You're talking about
And the co-
utilities bill?
Yeah,
The 80,000 is what they pay the county. That's not the actual utilities. And I don't know what the utilities are.
Yeah. I don't have a calculation of that. That's a study that could be done. One thing I would want to mention, though, Lena mentioned it a few times, there's a difference between just energy efficiency upgrades and then HVAC changes to meet today's building codes, which do introduce outside air, but it's all about indoor air quality, not just saving money. And those two things tend to fight each other a little bit, because when you introduce outside air, then you have to condition it more, but it's a healthier environment. So in order to, yeah, same with schools. That's why a new school costs more to run, because it's a healthier HVAC system than an old one.
people coming in, getting sick or?
No, we always go, if the building's hot or cold, you dress according to your office, you know. And the places where there was mold, when there was a trouble with the building, we don't have people in those offices, it's the basement.
Dave, you had a question?
Yes, when I heard the mention of Johnson Control, that sent a shiver down my back with the problems we've had with other buildings. And refresh my memory, but didn't you mention that with the new building, you would not be going in with such a sophisticated type of system, but more of an individual system that would be much easier to control, maintain, and wouldn't require the high technical demands that we found over at the
Right.
Law and Justice Center?
And I'm not the mechanical engineer, so I probably won't say this right, but the idea is that we want to give you controllability of zones, but not have the super elaborate operational system that makes it so that you have to be an expert to be able to operate it, something that's easier, more intuitive to operate. I've talked to mechanical about it, and I apologize, I don't really remember exactly what systems would be, but I'm assured that in our cost model, we've shown that that's an achievable thing to do.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bunning.
I guess my question is going to be for my fellow county board members. When I've heard the words return on an investment a few times since this meeting started, and I guess someone needs to explain to me, what are we looking for a return on investment? Now, as a county government trying to provide county services for our constituents, how can we put a return on investment, Bill or Carolyn, if you guys can maybe elaborate me a little bit on that?
Return on investment, as I understand it, is the amount of time that it would take for us to save enough money through the energy efficiency to pay for the upgrades that were necessary in order to achieve that efficiency. So, for example, if you get it's like if you get a new furnace for your house, they say, oh, with the new efficiency, you'll pay for this in 10 years. And that's kind of the numbers we're kind of looking at, because we don't have any information as to whether or not we would actually, or how much we would actually save in energy efficiency. And the new building, the Law and Justice Center, was pitched as a green, energy efficient building, and you know how that turned out, so.
Well, then I guess my concern on renovating a building with 28,000 feet, if we were to renovate that and we are renovating useless space, I think we need to take that into account when we talk about our return on investment.
That's where you come out. Do you want to spend the extra $2-3 million to save just gonna say $50,000 a year. That's where you get stuck.
Yes, Mr. Holt?
I think if we're looking at return on investment, we wouldn't have built a new jail because I don't think it's got the more efficient, so the return is not there. I don't think this building would have been refurbished if we're looking at return on investment because, I mean, if that's your only selling point is it's got to be more efficient than what we've got now, then I think there's other reasons that we need to move forward with a new building. And the present courthouse is not more efficient than this building. So I think that if we're looking at a payback, it's not there. And I don't know that should be the decision maker on whether we go with a new H&E building or not. Should not, in my opinion, should not be based on are we going to get our money back in 10, 20, 30, or whatever years. You've got an old building there, you still got an old building there. With this, you had,
Oh,
I didn't interfere with you.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. That's what I said.
With this building, when you took it apart and redid it, you had a nice, firm, solid structure on the outside, so you had something there to work with that was worth saving. I think that building is not, in my opinion, worth saving. Thank you.
Okay, we're not going to be here tonight all night.
Mr. Chairman, I just heard Melinda say, and I think I heard this before, there's certain rooms they don't use because of the mold problem. And I guess as I go through this, I came here tonight and I told the chairman this, based on the numbers, if we could figure out how to do it, simply comparing new building to renovation, I think it's our responsibility to be prudent with dollars, that I started to lean toward renovation. But then the more I think about it, number one, I don't know where, Chris, Melinda, I don't know where you guys are going for 6 months or a year or whatever it takes. And the moving and that sort of thing, you know, in and out. But we've got a building with mold, we've got a building that has a totally antiquated heating, cooling system. Yeah, maybe people aren't getting sick, but I mean, it's a fact. You need fresh air and, you know, you need better. And by the time we invest all of that, as Darrell says, it's still an old building. It just seems to me that we're kind of at that crossroads whether, if we're going to do something, and I believe we should, rather than down the road, whether it's the next board or somebody, it's going to have major maintenance issues, whether it's new boilers or one thing or another. But to get a building that's energy efficient, it's functionally laid out the way Chris and Melinda want it, not the way Farnsworth wants it, the way they want it. And they've had input into the concept. They're going to have the input into the final design. A building that's going to serve us well in that location, because everybody's talked about it, that's important. It just seems to me, and I understand the questions and the thoughts, well, we don't have a design, so we don't have actual costs, but we're going to, somewhere we've got to step over that threshold and, well, spend some money to get that design to answer these questions.
But we need to know what we're doing in order to go for the design. Okay, we've got three. What?
I've got a motion.
Okay, we got three potential motions that we can make tonight. One is to build a new building. Two is to renovate and 3 is to do nothing. I've got a motion from Mr. Bunning to,
Hold on.
wait, we don't know what his motion is.
What was the motion?
My motion, understanding that I don't want to be here very late tonight and I want to get closer to our end game, but I don't think we've exhausted everything that we possibly could if we look countywide. My motion, and I'm excited to have it defeated if it's going to be defeated, is to not renovate the existing building. My motion is only to not renovate the existing building.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr.
You
Fanning.
didn't know what you were seconding.
We got a motion and a second
Okay.
I have a
to
question.
not renovate the old building. Mrs. Gerwin.
My question is, when you say renovate, do you mean an extensive renovation versus just a boiler repair? Or do you include a boiler repair as a renovation?
My motion, as stated, is while they are currently in the building, if something has to be done for them to officially run the building, we will do that. But it is any type of renovation. We are not going to put any type of renovation in the existing building.
Okay.
We have to have general maintenance, but as far as renovation goes, we will not renovate the existing building.
The motion and the second is to do nothing. Is to not renovate,
Yeah.
not renovate the old building. Roll call, please, Christie.
Okay, and that was Bunning and Fannin, correct?
Bunning and Fannin.
Okay. Wait, Vietti. Bunning.
Yes.
Flagel.
No.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Schaefer.
Yes, but I want particular attention to the upper end if we're going to do something new. Don't let this project crowd out other opportunities that may present themselves to us by spending too much on this, because I don't want to editorialize here, but 42% of the budget comes from grants. I'd say if there's anything we can say in grants coming from the state of Illinois, that's probably going to go down rather than go up. Those dollars are not going to be replaced by the taxpayers, so these functions that we're planning for may not exist in 5 years. So be careful with the square footage. You may want to go down to 15,000 square feet. So with that, I'll say yes.
Killian.
Yes.
Kestner.
Yes.
Ritter.
He's gone.
Okay. He hit the road. When did he leave? Gerwin.
Okay, if I understand that the motion means that we do nothing unless the boiler needs to be fixed for emergency purposes, then I'm voting yes. Is that what I guess I still need clarification.
A repair, whether it's the boiler or a roof leak or whatever, that's maintenance.
General maintenance.
So no renovation. Okay, so I will vote yes.
Lovell.
Yes.
Allen. Arbogast.
Yes.
Well, Ambrose.
Yes.
Holt.
Yes.
Runyon.
Yes.
Mays.
No.
Heath.
Yes.
Young.
Yes.
Yoder.
I think it was a convoluted motion, and it made it very confusing what to vote, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm leaning, John voted, I think, because I think this is kind of an absolute. We won't renovate that building.
That would be true.
And
That's the motion.
and saying yes means we won't vote, yeah, it means no. I'm going to vote no.
And Fannin.
Yes. And now that the voting's done, I'd like to tack on to what Tim stated about square footage needs. The building is 28,000 square foot. There was a needs assessment done it was before I became chairman. And the needs assessment for that assessment was 24,000 square feet. We're down to 19,000 square feet. I believe in the future that very well could go even down further. So I agree with Tim as to not lock ourselves in.
So your vote would
I already voted. Vote's done. I just,
It carried. It was 16 ayes, 3 nays, and 5 absent.
Okay, so now we could have another motion, I think, to build a new building. Is that right? Heath made a motion to, who was the second? Vietti, to build a new building.
Mr. Heath, could you either change or I'll ask the man, when you say build a new building, I think that's a big leap, but I think it could extend the Farnsworth work to work on a design so that these square footage and cost issues design a new building.
Well, Dave, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Design a Oh, well, I guess, okay, the motion would be then to engage Farnsworth to do, working with the tenants, Chris and Melinda, on a design to meet the needs as they see them now and in the near future.
And that second was Vietti, or?
No,
Okay.
Heath.
Heath?
Seconded mine.
Okay. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that before we go?
I had a question. Basically, this allows Farnsworth to take the next step.
Yes. Get a design.
It doesn't, right, come up with a design so we can bid out the job or something?
So this is authorizing the pay for Farnsworth to design the next step, right? Were we authorizing that pay with this motion?
My intent would be that we can then understand and address and question and debate the issues of square footage and cost more precisely. So yes, design a building.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Okay, we got several questions. Bunny?
The only question that I have is, I want to make sure before we break ground for a new building that we have exhausted every other potential option with the motion that was made earlier that it was going to be in the Pontiac area. I want to make sure that we have exhausted every option to look at every or any potential opening buildings or soon-to-be opening buildings to see if we can't retool it and move them into an existing building.
Jason, in one of the, well, let's go ahead. Let's address. Carolyn, did you have something? Okay, we're going to vote then.
vote. Was there a vote? Jason, was there a question there? Or
vote.
just a statement? And the reason I ask is because one of the things that I said at the last meeting was there was a number of questions that were being asked by the public that we weren't able to answer. And one of those, and I know I was late and I apologize for that, and I don't know, maybe I missed it, but there was questions being asked of me personally as to what buildings were looked at and why weren't they financially feasible? And was there numbers to go along with that? Is that where you were going, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a few buildings that are currently open now that are for sale, some that potentially could be, and I didn't know if, I mean, I know the working group has worked on it.
And I know we looked at some buildings.
And I asked in the email if anybody had any ideas, if they could get back to us, and we would take a look at them even before this meeting. I mean, we've got several, and we have discussed it. I hate to do it here in open session.
But I think
because that's negotiations.
I think what the public was wanting was some numbers to say, okay, well, we looked at this building and it was going to be X, Y, or wasn't able to be used because of this or that. And I think that's some of the questions that were being asked.
John, did you have something? Well, we're going to vote pretty quick. Get your comment in.
Microphone. What Tim said during the vote I think is really worth pointing out. We had the old study in 2010 needed 25,000 square foot. Now we're saying 19,000 square foot. Hopefully this stuff goes down over the years and you know, and building a new building, I think, is just going to enforce this notion that now we have the space, we got to use it and fill it. Versus take the current building, it costs a few million over the next 5 or 10 years to keep it running for them, and we're done. It's not 6 million. So that's how I'm going to keep voting on this.
Okay, well, we still have two county offices that we originally had planned to be in this building, the coroner and the VAC, and they are not in this building either. So if, you know, we do have some people that could go in. Also, if it was down enough, it'd be a perfect fit for IHR if they're still interested. Carolyn, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to explain that I'm going to vote no because I just toured the building and it doesn't appear to be deficient to me for its purpose. I don't think it's broke. I don't think we need to fix it. The boiler has been a bogeyman for years, for decades. They built things to last back then. If that needs to be repaired, fine. If you need more fresh air, I suspect what they do now is open the window. And I think that that is a better alternative in a moving target world of healthcare to wait a bit and see what transpires before we jump and spend $6 million that could be used for better purposes. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Runyon.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I understand what Tim was saying there a little bit ago when that last roll call was going on, but I don't necessarily agree with his conclusions. You're trying to predict the future, and in my experience, you can't predict the future. You have no idea what next year is going to bring. And while
Then why would you build a building, Mark?
he's probably right that the state funding is going to go down. I'm not going to really argue that, but we don't know that for a fact. And I just assume that if we're going to build the building, which I kind of assume is going to happen here pretty quick, or at least take the next step into it anyway, that we go with what we need right now, and the future will play itself out.
Okay, let's go ahead and take the vote. The proposal was 6 million.
Oh, no. For the design,
To do the design work?
15.
They'll have, yeah,
So for the,
it was in there.
part of the reason for this
It's,
process, I think we're talking about maybe just step 3 on this schematic design. Could be about 20% of basic services, and then, so about 20% of that, plus then if you were gonna do some of the site work, the survey and those kind of costs.
yeah, good.
Not if you were just wanting to do step 3. On my schedule, if you see that slide, you'd be doing 20% of that.
Are you listening on this, Pat?
Something along those lines. But that's kind of a normal.
So the total amount is around 400,000?
A little over 400,000.
Okay, we're going to roll call this motion. Christie?
Fieri,
Yes.
Bunning,
No.
Slagle,
No.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Kestner,
Yes.
Ritter,
He's not back.
was there more than one? Okay, sorry. Gerwin. Lovell,
Yes.
Allen. Arbogast,
Yes?
Ambrose,
No.
Holt,
Yes.
Runyon,
Yes.
Mays,
No.
Heath,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Yoder,
Gosh, it's an easy no vote.
Fannin.
Because I can't answer questions to the public, I'm going to have to vote no. All those questions I can't.
12 ayes,
Do I believe we need it?
7
Yes, I do,
nays.
but I can't answer questions. So
Motion carried.
Okay. Any public comment from anybody?
I still don't know where IHR stands, so to speak. Are we in with this? Are we out?
You're out right now. You're not in. But we're gonna work with you. Try to, we talked about looking to see if we can cut that off somehow and leave you that space, or
Okay.
you were gonna check and see if there were any grants or anything available to you, or Humiston Trust was interested in doing anything, and
We're just doing a schematic design.
What's that?
We're just doing a schematic design for a new building. That's step 3. We know of the concern and the space. We're now in a position we can, I think, have those discussions on how we provide that.
Okay. All
okay,
right.
Joe.
Thanks.
Mr. Zier?
My name's Harvey Zier. I just had a couple comments. I was looking through some material that was been produced for this board over the past several years ago. One of the things I noticed in there, they compared our county with 5 other counties or 6 other counties. I know Iroquois, Woodford, Henry, Grundy, and there was a couple others. I can't remember what they were. But Livingston County pays 65% more for social services than those average of those counties. I don't know why or what's figured in there. Our tax levy is 25% higher than the average of those 5 counties, or 7, whatever it was. Our expenses are 45% higher than those peer counties. Those counties, I mentioned some of them, they're within the range of us. I think there's a couple of them a little bit bigger and a couple of them a little smaller. So I'm a little concerned about what we're doing here, spending money on something. We've been saved by the landfill, obviously. I don't know where we'd be without the landfill, because you can't have 45% higher expenses in being around. I haven't seen anything you've done on this H&E building that tells me why you're doing it. We always come up with a need that these people say, we got to get out of that building, we got to do something about this or that or another thing. If so, go at it. But I haven't ever heard that. Not one time I said, well, we got to get out of there. Well, we talk about mold. I thought they were talking about mold in the basement. Now we got somewhere else upstairs. But anyway, those are my concerns. And I've got a whole list of things. I'm not going to go through them, thank God. But there's just things I have not heard from this group that would tell me that we need a building. We need a building. If not, why are we doing it? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in public comment? And then I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Who's that? Mays, and a second?
Second.
Fannin. All those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you.